In 5th place, we have Port Arthur. Port Arthur is a town and former convict settlement on the Tasman Peninsula in Tasmania, Australia. The site forms part of the Australian Convict Sites, a World Heritage Property consisting of 11 remaining penal sites originally built within the British Empire during the 18th and 19th centuries on Australian coastal strips. So collectively, these sites, including Port Arthur, are described by UNESCO as the best surviving examples of large-scale convict transportation and the colonial expansion of European powers through the presence and labor of convicts. From 1833 until 1877, Port Arthur was the destination for those deemed the most hardened of convicted British criminals, those who were secondary offenders having re-offended after their arrival in Australia. Rebellious personalities from other convict stations were also sent there. In addition, Port Arthur had some of the strictest security measures of the British penal system. So, as you can imagine, that would produce some pretty scary figures still kicking around with a grudge to hold. One popular figure who has been spotted frequently goes by the moniker of Reverend George. A tour coordinator for the settlement is adamant that photos have been captured of the spirit, usually near the parsonage, which is where he's believed to have passed some time in the 1870s. One of the more fearful spirits spotted on the grounds is named John Gold, a nasty convict who enjoys leering at unsuspecting visitors, often causing younglings to throw uncharacteristic tantrums and more. All in all, apparently there are more than 2,000 reports of unexplained activity, all bundled into 20 bulging files full of sightings of ghosts and strange emotional reactions to the buildings. In 4th place, we have Myrtle's Plantation. Located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and built in 1796 by General David Bradford on top of a former burial ground, this domicile is believed to play home to at least 12 different ghosts. So, brace yourselves for a highlight reel. Our first ghosty story begins with a newly married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Clark Woodruff. Mr. Woodruff was a cruel and harmful man and owned numerous indentured servants, which was the icky norm at the time, and one in particular that he liked to, punish went by the name of Chloe. Now, Chloe tried to protect herself from the wrongful punishments by listening in on the Woodruffs' conversations and modifying her behavior, which, is kind of brilliant. Sadly though, one day after being caught eavesdropping, Clark had one of Chloe's ears cut off. Her mutilation was hidden, at the demand of the Woodruffs, by the use of a green turban. Even though most folks wouldn't see the damage, the painful experience would stay with Chloe and inspire her to make plans for revenge. On the 9th birthday of the Woodruff's daughter, Chloe placed poisonous oleander leaves into the cake, intending to only get them sick so she could nurse them back to health and earn a favor with the family. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Tragically, the dosage was lethal, and it ended up killing the missus and the offspring. After word spread of her actions on the plantation, the other servants were the ones to take revenge. Chloe was hanged by the neck for everyone to witness until the life was drained from her body, and then her body was weighed down by rocks and thrown into the Mississippi River. Multiple visitors to the current location have reported seeing the transparent and ghostly apparitions of a young girl wearing a green turban moving throughout the property. In 1992, the owner took a photo that they believe captures Chloe's spirit. This photo was originally intended to be used to secure an insurance policy for the home in case of fire or other natural disasters, not to prove paranormal activity. The presence of a human figure within the photo was undiscovered until it was developed. Many tests have been done to verify its authenticity, but make sure to let me know in the comments what you folks think after seeing it. Alrighty, what's next? Oh, the next owner of the property, a wealthy family man, and his 5 wards would pass away from tuberculosis on the property. The home was later passed to one of his surviving daughters and her husband, the Winters. Mr. William Winter was a proud member of his community and taught Sunday school out of the home. So one day, as William was teaching, an unknown man rode up on a horse yelling to see him. And as he came out to address the man, he was shot at point-blank range on his front porch. William retreated into the home and staggered partway up the stairs before passing away in his wife's arms on the 17th step of the staircase. The sound of his strong and forceful stomps still linger in the home today, as visitors report hearing heavy footsteps from empty staircases. The overall paranormal activity became more noticeable in the 1970s once it was purchased by the Myers family. Oh, right, remember how I mentioned it was stupidly built over a burial ground? The ghost of a young Native American woman has been repeatedly spotted, fluttering about. During the Civil War, the house was ransacked by Union soldiers, and legend claims that 3 were killed in the house, leaving a scarlet stain in a doorway, roughly the size of a human body that cannot be removed. In 3rd place, we have the Monte Cristo Homestead. The 2-story Victorian manor was built by pioneer Christopher William Crawley in the New South Wales town of June in 1885 before his homestead became riddled with death and now claims to be the most haunted house in Australia. To be specific, a stable boy burned to death, a tiny human was thrown down the stairs, a maid was lobbed off a balcony, and a caretaker kaboomed to death, among others. Pardon me, I jumped straight to the good stuff without the history. Christopher Crawley first built the mansion in, 1885, where he lived with his wife wife Elizabeth, their 7 kiddos, and a series of servants. He was a wealthy farmer and landowner who had made his fortune in Juni, a small town in the Riverina region, after the Great Southern Railway line opened in 1878. With the success of his hotel and land sales, Christopher was able to retire early and began construction on his Monte Cristo homestead. This home was a status symbol for the Crawley family and a social hub for the town's most wealthy. Now, despite all the glamour, the Crawleys are said to have been holding on to many dark secrets and tragedies. Remember a moment ago when I mentioned that a young maid was said to have fallen to her death from the second-story balcony? Well, a bleach stain still remains where the scarlet life force was attempted to be removed, and footsteps can be heard pacing the top balcony in the middle of the night. Some even see the outline of a female figure on the balcony as well. The Crawleys themselves weren't immune from the, deathly Monte Cristo. Their youngest daughter, under a year old, died when her nanny accidentally dropped her down the stairs. Some claim it was on purpose, while others have ruled it as an accident. Feel free to let me know your theories in the comments. So the Monte Cristo homestead remained empty for over a decade after the last Crawley left in 1948. In 1963, Olive and Reginald Ryan purchased the now rundown manor for only about $1,000 Australian dollars. That's a bargain. Bone-chilling paranormal experiences were part of everyday life for the Ryan family, with Olive claiming to have had her name called out multiple times, only to find no one there. All of the offspring have also reported sightings of figures in old-fashioned clothes and have felt cold hands on their shoulders. Not the best place to grow up. In second place, we have Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. The Casa-like penitentiary took solitary confinement to new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When an inmate left his cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he couldn't see or be seen. Now, the prison had to abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding from 1913 until it closed in 1970, although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe. Current reported paranormal happenings have included, disembodied laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing footsteps. Yeah. Elaborating now. Cell Block 12 is known for echoing voices and cackling, while Cell Block 6 is known for shadowy figures darting along the walls, and Cell Block 4 tends to have visions of ghostly faces. Many people have reported seeing a silhouette of a guard in one of the towers. Oh, and that might not sound weird, but there's no way to physically get to the top of the tower today, since the brick stairs crumbled away, many years ago. One of the more legendary tales comes from Gary Johnson, who helps maintain the crumbling old locks at the prison. In the early 1990s, he had just opened an old lock in cell block 4 when he says a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. He described a negative, horrible energy that exploded out of the cell, while tormented faces appeared on the cell walls, and that one form in particular beckoned to him. Although executions were not carried out at Eastern State, the prison was home to its fair share of deaths. At least, 2 guards were killed over the years, as were many inmates, with their spirits still very much present. In first place, we have the entire town of Picton, New South Wales. So according to my research, it's the most haunted town in Australia. But Picton is also known for its countryside views and paranormal gardens. The town is located about 80 kilometers southwest of Sydney and has a historical significance due to its buildings and railway tunnels. The Mushroom Tunnel, also known as the former Red Bank Range Railway, is our main focus for today. There are famous tales of ghosts drifting around the tunnel, with the most popular being linked with a terrible railway accident involving a woman named Emily Ballard. Apparently, when the tunnel was still in use by the railway, Emily had been walking through it and was killed by an oncoming locomotive. It is unclear whether she deliberately ended her life or if her death was just an unfortunate accident. Reports suggest people often witness Emily and 2 other women ghosts, and also hear some scary voices. Just some cryings and shrieks. No biggie. The apparition of Emily has been seen in the depths of the tunnel, and is described as a white flowing figure of a woman with no face. Many people have also reported a sudden drop of temperature, eerie shadows, gusts of wind, orbs, body chills, and many weird other things happening inside the tunnel. The tunnel was apparently used to store mustard gas, spray tanks, and ammunition during World War II. It was also used as a mushroom farm, ergo the mushroom moniker amongst locals. From time to time, black shadows or figures have been seen on walls throughout the tunnel. Some witnesses have reported white lights hovering above people's heads and figures appearing out of the darkness. Ghostly younglings have been witnessed, and electrical disturbances have occurred to devices in the tunnel. People have also felt, sudden drops in temperature. Oh, almost forgot, there is a ghost train hunting the tunnel, because human spirits aren't enough. During a tour group experience, one witness recounted that when they reached the tunnel, he said the entire group noticed a random light in the distance, and the sound of a steam train overwhelming the area. He said that everyone, including the tour guide, scrambled to hug the walls. And now remember, this tunnel has been inactive for almost 50 years at this time. The witness claims he felt the wind on his face as he closed his eyes and the train passed. Want to hear about a ghosty haunting the cemetery near the tunnel? Of course you do. Blanche Moon was a youngling who died in 1886 and haunts the cemetery. She was the daughter of Henry and Fanny Moon, and her father is believed to have been the timber worker who helped make the railway sleeper she fell off of while playing, which is the fall that led to her death. In January of 2010, a family visiting St. Mark's Cemetery snapped a photo apparently showing the ghosts of two younglings who died almost 60 years apart. And yep, you guessed it, one of them is believed to be Blanche Moon herself. The family claimed that there were no young people in the cemetery at the time the photo was taken, and that the figures of the two were only noticed when the pictures were downloaded to a computer. Other places in Picton rumored to be haunted are the Imperial Hotel, where many staff report the feeling of someone following them through several parts of the building, and at times, the jukebox begins to play, even though it's not connected to power. Wallendilly Shire Hall, which is reported to be haunted by 3 ghosts, including a bearded man wearing a hat and suit, a small mischievous boy, and a little girl, who is most often heard rather than seen. Stone Quarry Viaduct, where over the years many people have drowned in the creek. Locals have heard ghoulish sounds of people swimming and splashing in said creek. And finally, Emmett Cottages, where the ghost of a woman is seen in the window of the building, and shop owners often find their displays have been moved overnight.
Number 5 on this list is Villa Paula. This haunted place is located in Miami and has quite the interesting guest in the backyard. Thrillist says, this stately white mansion was originally constructed as the Cuban consulate in the mid-1920s, home to Consul Domingo Millord and his wife, Paula. The Cuban-born Paula was known to spend her days playing piano and drinking Cuban coffee until she died from complications from a leg amputation in 1932. Legend has it that Domingo interred his late wife in a sarcophagus laid in the backyard. The sarcophagus is still there now, covered by ficus tree roots and nearly impossible to reach. Whether or not it actually contains her mortal remains is debatable at best, but reports of her ghost persist. It's said her ghost is in different rooms there, says History Miami's Dr. Paul George. People who've lived at Villa Paula since have had existential kinds of experiences. Among them, phantom coffee smells and piano playing, a one-legged woman roaming about as well. So there is a literal sarcophagus just chilling in this person's backyard. Can you imagine having that just show up on the house listing? I'd be like, no, we are not okay with that. I'm kind of surprised that no one has gone to go deal with the sarcophagus before. I mean, you can't just leave this thing down there like that and expect the ghost to just go away. I would imagine that Paula's spirit is probably tied to the sarcophagus, and in turn it's tied to the area. Granted, I do kind of understand why no one wants to dig it up. Think about all the crazy stuff that's happened with the pyramids. You dig up this sarcophagus and you might end up being cursed for life, which is obviously something that nobody wants. But now we're left in this awkward place where we can't get rid of the ghost, but at the same time can't live here either. That's why I'm recommending to all of you watching, just avoid Villa Paula altogether. Number 4 on this list is the Blue Anchor Pub. So this is an interesting one because this pub didn't actually start in Florida. Thrillist says this pub was built in 1840s London during Jack the Ripper times, so it should be no surprise that it's haunted. The story goes that the bar was raised in London, but its wooden interiors were sent to New York City and then onto this sleepy Florida town in 1996. Little did anyone know that the pub's original elements came with the ghost of Bertha Starkley, a cheating wife who was murdered by her husband. Today, she can be heard rattling pots, knocking things over, and wailing in the middle of the night at the Blue Anchor. Every night around 10 p.m., the time that she was murdered, Bertha likes to remind everyone she's still here, so the current owners ring the ship's bell to scare her away. So, first thing, I've never actually heard of that before, where they take a building from one continent and then just decide to move it over to another continent. This bar must look pretty cool on the inside to go to all that trouble though. Obviously, this was a bit of a mistake and everyone would have been better served if we relocated this thing straight to the dump. Bertha doesn't care if it's in London or America or anywhere. As long as the structure of this pub is still intact, her ghost will still be floating around, which makes it very hard to enjoy a night out at this place. Like, imagine drowning several pints, going to take a piss, and then getting ambushed by some 1800s ghost in the bathroom with your pee-pee hanging out. Like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to recover from that, folks. Number 3 on this list is St. Augustine's Lighthouse. Ah yes, the haunted lighthouse, a true classic. Thrillist says St. Augustine's iconic lighthouse is a Florida landmark built in 1874. But climb up its 219 steps, and it's not just the views that will take your breath away. First, there's the ghost of Joseph Andrew, the original lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the 165-foot tower. Then there are the Pity's 2 daughters who were playing with a building cart when it broke loose and slid into the nearby bay, drowning them both. While the girls giggle and run up and down the lighthouse steps, Joseph has been reported smoking cigars at the top of the lighthouse, keeping watch over his forever home. You know, guys, if I had to be a ghost, then being Joseph wouldn't be the worst. I get to look out at the pretty scenery at the top of my lighthouse where hardly anyone bothers me, and I get to smoke cigars all day. Like, obviously I wouldn't want to be a ghost, but if I had to be, then this wouldn't be that bad. Either way, I'm not a ghost now. I am very much a human being, and if I want to stay a human being, then I recommend avoiding this place. It can obviously be very jarring to see 2 little ghost girls running around, and even though all of these ghosts are supposed to be pretty chill, we know that the paranormal can be unpredictable. I'm sure that there are tons of other non-haunted Florida lighthouses around if you're really pining for a good view. Number 2 on this list is Fort East Martello. If you don't like dolls, then you really won't like this one, guys. Thrillist says if there is one rule all Floridians follow, it's do not mess with Robert the doll. The 4-foot figurine has terrorized anyone who hasn't taken him seriously since he was gifted to artist Robert Jean Otto in 1904. Otto blamed any mischievous act around him on Robert the doll, effectively coining the oft-repeated Robert did it mantra. The doll currently holds court inside Fort East Martello, where he lives inside a glass case surrounded by a constant soundtrack of haunting xylophone music. The room evokes a heavy air immediately upon entering, and the walls are papered with apology notes from cocky tourists who've dared cross the world's most haunted plaything. Even the Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne, felt Robert's wrath when he suffered a series of health mishaps shortly after dissing the doll on his reality show. I don't like dolls, folks, especially the haunted variety, so this entry obviously had to make the list. Clearly it curses you after you see it because people literally have to come back here and ask for its forgiveness. I don't know if the notes work or not, but I guess that's all you can do when you're dealing with a haunted doll. Hopefully this doll can just chill out and stop haunting people, but in the meantime, I just flat out avoid going to this place in Florida altogether. And number 1 on this list is Casa Monica Resort and Spa. It really sucks that this place is so haunted because it's truly beautiful. Thrillist says St. Augustine's fanciest hotel is also its most haunted. In fact, this 5-star Mediterranean revival haunt is a hotbed of spectral activity. Children are heard running along the 4th floor, but no one is there. The radio in the Ponce de Leon suite randomly comes on, but no one's there. Guests of room 411 wake up to people staring at them, but no one's there. But it's the 3-story Flagler suite high in the tower that's most haunted. Maids have seen a child's handprint appear on the 1st floor bathroom mirror, and after knocking, one heard a man say, "We've been expecting you," from an empty bedroom. Its spookiest claim to fame, however, is the male ghost staring out of the top tower window. He's believed to be the ghost of one of 2 people, either Franklin Smith, the architect who built the hotel, or Henry Flagler, the man who purchased it. I personally don't care if it's the architect, the man who purchased it, or God. Anyone who says, "I've been waiting for you as I enter an empty bedroom," It's not the type of individual I want to be around. Also, where are these children coming from and what are those sounds? Okay, so you want to tell me a scary story where the architect of the building fell in love with his work and then when he died, his ghost stayed here. Alright, fine, I can buy that, I can believe that, but like, what are the children doing here? What do they have to do with this place and the architect? Maybe this is just one of those spots where it doesn't matter what happened here, it doesn't matter what will happen here in the future, it's just always destined to be haunted. But there you have it, guys, that is our list of the top 5 haunted places in Florida you should never visit. Please let me know in the comments down below what you thought about this list and some other scary haunted places that you know about.
In 5th place, we have the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose. Fun fact, California tends to easily be one of the top 5 most haunted states out of the entire United States. And it was a struggle today not making another list with purely locations from, California. The origins for this crazy tale begin in 1881 when the passing of Sarah Winchester's mother, father-in-law, and husband, William Winchester, of the famed Winchester Repeating Arms Company, all happened in under a year, leaving her with a very large inheritance, assumed to be around $20 million, and a 50% stake in the company, making her one of the wealthiest women at the time. If $20 million doesn't sound super rich to y'all, in today's money that would be about $561.6 million. Chump change, right? After living in Connecticut for the majority of her life, an arthritis diagnosis and meeting with a medium convinced Sarah to start a new life in California. She believed her family to be cursed by victims of the Winchester rifle and began construction on what was originally a 2-story, 8-room farmhouse, which she purchased in 1886. She and her late husband shared an interest in architecture, and after dismissing all of the architects she originally met with, Sarah decided to do all of the home planning herself. She was known to rebuild and abandon construction if anything didn't meet her expectations, which resulted in a maze-like design. It is believed that said maze-like design was mainly intended to confuse and keep spirits from harming her and what was left of her family. According to paranormal investigators Mary Jo Ignoffo and Joe Nickel, the bell tower built on the property was used to summon spirits, and Sarah was known to throw lavish parties for the beings she feared in an attempt to please them. It was reported in the San Jose News in 1897 that a 7-story tower was torn down and rebuilt 7 times. Honestly, I respect the attention to perfection, knowing what you want, and having the money to be able to not settle. As a result of her expansions, there are walled-off exterior windows and doors that lead to nowhere, along with staircases that end suddenly, and as the house grew in size, up to 5 additional levels were added to the home. When the 1906 San Francisco earthquake hit, the damage to the home was quite extensive, causing the collapse of the 7-story tower and most of the chimneys. An entire wing was destroyed along with the 3rd and 4th story additions, and pipes began protruding from what were once window boxes. Before the earthquake, the house is believed to have had 500 rooms, and at the time of Sarah's passing in 1922, the house had 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. Visitors to the house today have reported multiple instances of experiencing cold spots, footsteps, cooking smells, odd sounds, whispering, doors and windows slamming, and feelings of being watched. Honestly, I still kind of want to visit it. In 4th place, we have the Adelaide Ghoul. Thought to be one of the most haunted places in South Australia, the Adelaide Ghoul is said to be regularly visited by some of the inmates and prison officers who once wandered its halls. First off, Frederick, otherwise known as Fred Carr, went the way of the rope necklace on the 12th of November of 1927 for the killing of his wife, Maud. He protested his innocence, even up until the final moments before his death, exclaiming that the law required his body, but it cannot have his soul as he is innocent. Fred is said to regularly appear near the stairs leading to the upstairs cells of the new building. He is reported as a happy spirit, always neatly dressed in dark clothes and taking a polite interest in visitors wandering through his former home. Well, I'm glad one of the ghosties is chipper. Next up, we have William Baker Ashton, who was the first governor of the Adelaide Ghoul, and despite being a reasonably fair man, he was accused of wrongdoing. William was a very large man, and when he died in his office in 1854, his body could not be manipulated down his apartment's steep, narrow staircase. Instead, he was unceremoniously lowered out of the front window to the undertaker's waiting below. 3 months after his death, William was exonerated, which was a little too late. On warm, still nights with a hint of thunder in the air, his footsteps are said to be heard through the walls of solid stone as he struggles to move furniture in an empty room. Finally, Ben Ellis was the hangman for 10 years, from the mid-1860s to mid-1870s, and lived in a small apartment below what became the female dormitory. Ben took pride in his work and approached each task with complete professionalism and never questioned the right or wrong of his profession until the 30th of December of 1873, when he was required to hang a female prisoner, Elizabeth Woolcock. She was to be the first and only woman executed in South Australia. So this event changed the way Ben viewed his profession forever, and his restless spirit is said to appear often throughout the residence. In third place, we have the Crescent Hotel. Located in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, it was erected in 1886 and has served several purposes over time, such as a luxury resort, a conservatory for young women, and a junior college. But the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker. Norman was a millionaire inventor and radio personality who decided to pose as a doctor despite having no medical training and wanted to turn the hotel into a hospital that could cure cancer? He was eventually found out and was run out of town, but his spirit somehow found its way back to the hotel and found some otherworldly company as well. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 ghosts, ranging from a small girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. When current owners Marty and Elise bought the hotel in 1997, they hired 2 certified mediums to do a reading of the building. The mediums found that the hotel showed signs of being a portal to the other side, as in a dimension that holds the spirits of the dead and can be accessed by those on the same frequency as ghosts. That portal is located on top of what used to be the morgue. One thing I like to stress, especially when dealing with angry ghosties, is to never disturb the graves. And a formal archaeological dig was done on the property in 2019, uncovering Norman Baker's bottle grave, with some of the glass containers clearly showing fleshy remains, while others are believed to have held his assorted curing potions that never cured anyone. If you'd like to see them for yourself, they're on display in the Crescent's morgue. Oh, I totally forgot. The morgue, complete with autopsy table and a walk-in cooler where Baker stored cadavers and body parts, are open for public viewing. The experience comes with seeing the ghosts of younglings huddled under the morgue's autopsy table, pleading for help, the reoccurrence of a Baker patient who also served as a hospital assistant being seen in and around room 419, better known as Theodora's room, the early morning loud squeaking of wheels in the 3rd floor corridor, accompanied by sightings of a nurse pushing a gurney full of corpses down the hallway, only to see it vanish into thin air. In second place, we have the Airedale Mental Hospital. It's estimated that an astonishing 13,000 people passed away within the walls of the so-called Ararat Lunatic Asylum over its 140 years of operation, which made it perfect for today's list. So the now known Airedale Asylum was a psychiatric hospital in Ararat, a rural city in Victoria, Australia. So now considered a ghost town, the Airedale Asylum campus contains over 70 now abandoned buildings that once housed over 1,000 patients. As with many asylums of the time, it was meant to be self-sufficient and provide the patients, or inmates as they were referred to at the time, with labor that was believed to help in their treatments. Despite its closure as an asylum in 1993, the facility was used to house female prisoners during the renovation of the Dame Phyllis Frost Center. Now, while reports exist of apparitions, phantom sounds, visitors experiencing nausea, fainting, and pain, some ghosts from Airedale's past have made themselves known to those who are alive today. George Fittimont was the last governor, so in 1886, he was showing a group of people around the asylum when they started down a set of stairs. Suddenly, George fell to his knees, suffering a major heart attack, and passed on the spot. These days, tour guides and visitors hear heavy footsteps and banging on that same stairwell, but when they go to take a look, no one's there. Gary Webb was a career criminal and had a long rap sheet when he was finally taken into custody and sent to stay at Airedale. Gary got comfortable there and started to write letters to the media, telling them the inhuman and horrible things he was planning to do once he got out. Citizens began to worry, and a special law was passed to keep him contained there for the rest of his life. He began to self-mutilate at this time and was hospitalized over 70 times. He even castrated himself 3 times during his sentence. So today, Gary is said to haunt his former room, screaming at visitors to get out and pushing them out the door. Visitors to the hospital who happen to walk past the office of the former superintendent report a sudden bitter taste in their mouth. Would you like to know why? Of course you do. The superintendent ended his life in his office after swallowing cyanide. The rest of the woman's ward is haunted by a ghost named Nurse Carrie. She is said to watch over the tour guides. Her apparition, as well as others, have been seen in the woman's ward, donning old-time nurses' uniforms and disappearing into stone walls. Other folks report a tingling sensation in their head when they enter what used to be the shock therapy room. In the J ward in particular, visitors report feeling ill and suddenly afraid. Others slip into a trance, only released from it when they exit the building. Some people have even been bitten or pushed while walking through the J ward. The ward is also said to, be haunted by 3 prisoners who went the way of the rope necklace and buried on the property. They are said to be restless because they weren't given a proper burial, and their graves are only marked with 3 scratches on the prison wall. Could somebody fix it and give them a proper burial? Please? In first place, we have the Hotel Monte Vista in Flagstaff, Arizona. So with tourism on the rise in the 1920s, residents of Flagstaff decided that building a hotel was the crucial, next step in aiding the city's growth as one of northern Arizona's premier destinations. Fundraising began in early 1926, and by New Year's Day on 1927, the hotel was finally open, offering 73 guest rooms under the name Community Motel, which would later be changed to the Monte Vista, a name chosen by a 12-year-old contest winner. This hotel hosted one of the few hidden speakeasies in Flagstaff during Prohibition, which was, a late-night establishment fed by secret tunnels that were built by railroad workers and ran for miles below the downtown core. Over the years, it has adopted quite a few spirits, and I'd like to elaborate on 3 of them. Out of the many rooms in this historic hotel where the spirits of the past like to make their presence known, let's start with room 220, where an unusual one-time resident, known as the Meat Man, is still causing a stir to this day. This long-term boarder, who spent his days at the Monte Vista back in the early 1980s, had a somewhat unusual habit, hanging raw meat from a chandelier. No one has any clue why he did this, but definitely makes him memorable. One day, the poor schmuck was found dead in his room. Nothing suspicious otherwise, and what has happened in that room since that day is why he made this list. On one such occasion, not long after the Meat Man had passed, a maintenance worker for the hotel was up in room 220 making a few repairs. When he left, he turned off the lights and locked the door. But when he returned shortly after, he found that chaos had erupted in his absence. The television was fully on, playing at full volume, and even more distressing, the linens on the bed had been violently removed, ripped up, and scattered across the room as if in a fit of anger. The maintenance worker in question steered clear of room 220 from then on, but even today, guests in the room have reported the television acting on its own accord, though it has long since been replaced, as well as the cold touch of a man's hands. Ooh. Next up, the rocking chair of room 305. So the most common report, which has been well documented, is of an elderly woman in the rocking chair by the window. Guests have long told the tale of the chair moving by itself, knocking against the closet, and some have even seen the old woman herself, gazing longingly out the window. While the woman's name is not known, old stories from the hotel tell of a long-term resident who would, sit by the window, day in and day out, looking out into the world, perhaps waiting patiently for someone to return. Finally, I feel like I'd be cursed if I left out the ladies of room 306. In the early 1940s, 2 women of the night were working their shift, only to be picked up by a man who was staying in, room 306 of the Monte Vista Hotel and looking for some company for the night. The 2 women returned to his room, and that night were brutally ended and dumped out of the 3rd floor window to the street below. What happened to these women was horrendous, and it seems that they agree, seeing as their spirits are still haunting this room, lashing out at anyone who dares to stay there. In the decades since, guests have reported the uneasy feeling of being watched, as well as difficulty sleeping. Men in particular tend to be affected, with some claiming that ghostly hands have been placed over their mouths or throats while they sleep.
Number 5. The Castle of Good Hope. Coming up first on our list of haunted hotspots is going to be the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa. It was first built in the 17th century by the Dutch East India Company, so you just know there's bad vibes there to begin with. It's the oldest colonial building in South Africa, and if you believe the local legends, it's allegedly one of the most paranormal spots in the country. The first reported paranormal sighting from the castle came from 1915, when a tall, pale, mysterious man dressed in black, he sounds familiar, whose attire didn't match the era at all, country or anything, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, walking alongside one of the castle's ramparts before vanishing as soon as he appeared. Now that's pretty weird, definitely, not quite enough to label a place haunted, but it was a one-off incident, right? Well, in 1947, this same strange man kept appearing, making regular visits for weeks on end. He'd be jumping off the castle's walls, seemingly plummeting to his doom, only to reappear again to do it all again. I gotta be honest, he sounds kinda sick, all things considered. Sounds like he just wants to bungee jump and vibe out as a ghost. Another popular story from the castle is that of former governor, one Peter Giesbert van Noot. Whew, you try saying that 5 times fast. He passed in the castle on the 23rd of April, 1728, the same day he had sentenced 7 army deserters to the death sentence. The legend has it that one of these soldiers hexed him and demanded he face him and watch the execution. Van Noot was apparently a bit squeamish and refused the invitation, and later that day was found dead at his desk, slumped over. And some believe his ghost still wanders the castle's halls. And there were more ghosts I couldn't even fit into this one video because there's so many hauntings from this place. I recommend you read up about it afterwards. And if you want way more videos about haunted spots, ghosts, goblins, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, true stories, fake stories, we got all of that and then some. So click through on Top 5 Scary, find something to watch, something to fall asleep to, I don't judge. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but stay watching this video. We worked hard on it. Alright, moving on through. Number 4, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Maybe this one's a bit of an obvious pick, but our next entry is going to be the infamous Chernobyl exclusion zone, the real-life post-apocalyptic wasteland of Pripyat. Have you ever heard the word canopsia? Maybe not. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I only learned this word today. But it refers to a feeling of seeing an atmosphere that you know is supposed to be populated, but isn't. And I feel like that word definitely applies to Chernobyl, or like liminal is a very good feeling too. It is kind of a liminal space because you see all of these buildings and you can imagine a life happening there, but it's frozen in time. The Chernobyl blast would be enough to cover a whole video and then some. I heard there was a very good HBO series about it. And trying to cover it in under 2 minutes would be foolhardy, so here's the super quick Coles Note versions. Is that a late night safety test simulating a station blackout power failure ended up starting a huge blast, which eventually threw radioactive material that blew all over Pripyat and the surrounding areas, causing everyone to have to pick up everything and evacuate, never to return. 50,000 people used to live here, and now it's a ghost town. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I only know that line from COD 4. All gillied up, best level in the series. That one's just for my gamers out there. Now you can actually visit Chernobyl, although they don't really recommend you do. You know, it's not a fun hotspot for tourism or anything. People who delve into the zone for recreation or to find things are called stalkers, named after the Tarkovsky movie of the same name, revolving around visits to a strange zone, and not the video game Stalker, where bandits raid the apocalyptic zone, although you would be forgiven for thinking that. Visiting the zone is no easy task. For one, it's recommended that you absolutely go with a guide or someone who knows the area very well, and then come all the requirements. You mustn't touch anything whatsoever. No vegetation. There are wild dogs that live in Chernobyl, and they're very cute, but you can't touch them at all because there could be traces of radiation in their fur. You have to wear an outfit that covers as much as possible. Big boots, you know, don't show up in your sunners and flip-flops. They recommend wearing a mask too to avoid inhaling any dust or, you know, any of the radioactive particles that could still be floating around in the air. Real life radiation, not half as fun as the comic books. You are very unlikely to come out of here with any web slinging superpowers. More likely just gonna have a bad cough and, you know, your family's gonna get real sad. You're asked not to enter any buildings because some are so degraded that they could collapse literally at any minute with the wrong pressure applied somewhere, and then you're just another tragedy. Now, I've never been, but from pictures, Chernobyl genuinely seems unreal, like it's not part of the world, you know? It seems like it's something out of a movie or a video game, but it's this harrowing, soul-crushing reflection of our reality, a stark warning on the dangers of nuclear power, and a grim reminder that your life as you know it can be upended forever in but a moment. Number 3. Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The tomb of former Emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, is notable for many reasons. Maybe it was because in 1974, when farmers from the Shaanxi province were digging a well, they discovered hundreds upon hundreds of terracotta soldiers, complete with horses, chariots, officers, infantry, a court, I think even some bears, oh my. They discovered one of the world's greatest archaeological wonders, 2,000 terracotta soldiers in Qin Shi Huang's tomb. The tomb was built like this basically to serve as history's most impressive flex. Qin Shi Huang wanted to make it good and clear that even in death, he held more might and more power than anyone could ever imagine. You know that saying, you can't take it with you? Well, he wanted to take it with him. He wanted his own army to serve him in the afterlife. The wild part about this is we don't even know how far it goes, since it still hasn't fully been uncovered, even all these years later. Those thousands of terracotta soldiers might just be the first wave of guys. While he reigned, Qin Shi Huang wanted to make very sure that his tomb was a good approximation of his legacy, so thousands of laborers worked tirelessly for decades to create an emperor's tomb. They think that 700,000 laborers worked on this for 40 years. That's already unbelievable, but Qin Shi Huang only even lived to be 49, so good thing they got that done in time, eh? Qin Shi Huang himself is buried beneath an enormous pyramid mound that stands a good distance away from the rest of the tomb. Now here's where the haunted part starts to come in. According to historians, this central tomb contains treasures and wondrous objects he attained during his life, including a flowing river of pure mercury, which doesn't really sound like the greatest idea, but back then they thought that made you immortal. Soil testing the nearby areas does have elevated levels of mercury, so that might actually be true. No one is too eager to check though, since it sounds like Qin Shi Huang kitted this place out to keep any would-be Nathan Drakes or Lara Crofts from raiding this uncharted tomb. It's said that it's got ancient ballistas and all sorts of traps like mechanisms that'll fire arrows at potential grave robbers, and hey, that mercury vapor probably isn't doing you any favors, so don't try to breathe that in. In any case, the Chinese government has been in no rush to explore what's down there. It's best to let the sleeping dead lie, especially when the sleeping dead has thousands of personal bodyguards, and it's probably haunted, let's be real. Number 2. Snake Island. Our next entry, Isla de Quimada Grande, is formally dubbed as Snake Island, which really should tell you right off the bat that whatever I'm about to describe is not a friendly place. Traditionally, places are only named things like Snake Island if they're like, filled to bursting with snakes, or if they're home to like a snake-themed supervillain or something. I'm pretty sure the guys who fought G.I. Joe lived on Snake Island. Anyway, Snake Island is called that because by conservative estimates, there's roughly a snake for every square meter of the island, meaning there's anywhere from 4,000 golden lancehead vipers or more living there. There's more snakes than there are people, and that's because most Brazilian locals know way better than to go to an island where one of the most venomous snakes on the planet live. Yeah, I left that part out. Well, I'm talking about it now. It's not just like garter snakes slithering about here. Isla de Quimada Grande is home to the golden lancehead, a beautiful creature in its own right that just happens to be one of the most lethal bites to humans. A bite from this snake can cause, let's list off some fun side effects: kidney damage, necrosis, brain hemorrhaging, venom poisoning, and oh, my favorite, internal intestinal damage. So just leave them alone. Even if for some bizarre reason I've told you all of that and you just love going to places you're not meant to and you're just dying for a chance to go visit venomous Snake Island, you are going to run into a bit of trouble because it's literally forbidden. The Brazilian government strictly monitors those who travel. Naval forces do visit annually to maintain the lighthouse, and there's a research station to study and analyze the local population, but all of these visits are accompanied by paramedics and trained doctors, just in case any of the locals decide to say hello the only way they know how. Am I the only one who thinks the golden lancehead is kind of cute, like in a little weird way? I don't want one as a pet, but I don't know, I think these danger noodles have very cute little eyes, but maybe that's just one of my red flags. And number 1, Poveglia. This list has not been pleasant. I guess I should have expected that, given the tone of all of these wretched, horrible, and haunted places. So let's close this list off and find somewhere nice and sunny to get away from all of life's woes. Maybe somewhere nice like, I don't know, Italy? Maybe somewhere off the coast of Venice, like the island of Poveglia? Now, Poveglia is an infamous island in Italian history. It once served as a quarantine zone and final resting place for victims of the Black Plague. You know that one. As the plague ravaged Europe and paranoia set in across the lands, it was said that anyone who showed so much as a symptom, if you had a runny nose, they shipped you off to Poveglia to live out the rest of your days. Oftentimes, they would send people who weren't even really sick. You just complain about a headache trying to get a day off work and you're on a longboat to the last island you're ever going to go to. It's said that over 50% of the island's soil is made of burned human ash. Let that set in for a second. The ground itself is haunted. In the early 19th century, the island converted from a quarantine zone to a mental asylum because I guess it thought that that wasn't scary enough. The asylum did not do much to improve Poveglia's reputation. Instead of being home to the sick, now it was home to droves of mentally unwell patients being made into victims by a doctor's sick experiments. Cruel doctors at the asylum would impose their patients into lobotomies with no concern for sanitation or their safety, with chisels, drills, and rarely if ever using anesthetic. An old ghost story has it that the main doctor at the asylum was haunted by the spirits of his former patients and the crimes he'd committed, and it drove him to such madness that he cast himself off the bell tower of the island, where they say his screams can still be heard. Now, if I told you all of that and you still want to visit, first of all, why? And second of all, you're going to need to be pretty crafty, as it's totally completely forbidden. You will be pressed to the fullest extent of the law if you're caught trespassing, not even remotely worth the risk if you ask me. At best, you get arrested. At worst, haunted for the rest of your days. Number 5. The Lexington. If you're a Texas native, then you probably don't need much introduction to the USS Lexington. Formerly known as the Blue Ghost, the decommissioned aircraft carrier now stands as a museum, and it's thought by some to hold a lot more than some old war relics and stories. It might just contain some old souls who've never quite left its service. The museum's director of operations, Charles Russell, claims that the museum receives hundreds upon hundreds of reports of supernatural and inexplicable activity and sightings every single year. Most famous among them is a benevolent ghost dressed in a sailor's uniform who aids guests in finding their way around the ship before vanishing back into the air. He describes one particularly vivid encounter with a spirit inhabiting his office where, after losing 6 pens over the course of a week, he found all of them arranged perfectly, laying side by side in front of his keyboard. He reassures visitors that the spirits who live aboard the Lexington are playful, not frightful. They're more like Casper in that regard, I guess. Other stories tell sightings and reports of hearing lost souls running for cover after a torpedo attack, describing running sounds and other strange noises in the hangar bay. The paranormal tour guide aboard the Lexington describes it as, this was their home and they don't want to go anywhere else. I kind of get it, you know? I'd want to live on an aircraft carrier. That seems pretty cool. I'd try to swing that as long as I could. Like most purportedly haunted locations, if finding something spooky in the cold steel of the Lexington truly interests you, the museum offers a paranormal investigation tour where guests can spend the night with their own equipment in the hopes of finding someone to trip up your EVP meter. And if that ain't enough for you and you're looking for something spooky from the confines of your own home, well, we can hook you up with that real easy. Click through on Top 5 Scary because we've got loads of videos about haunted spots, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, and just about anything freaky you can think up. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but, stay watching this video as well, okay? We worked hard. Number 4. Le Carafe. Le Carafe up in Houston looks unassuming at first. Looks like a pretty typical dive bar experience. Looks nice though, I definitely would like to go. But if you believe the rumors, allegedly this is one of the most haunted buildings in the entire state. The bar also is one of the oldest buildings in Texas as well, having been initially built sometime in the early 1800s. It's seen life as quite a few things: a pharmacy, an apothecary, a bakery, and eventually Le Carafe. So it's not too surprising that in all of its years of service, picked up a few guests who aren't ready to pay the bill and leave just yet. Many regular customers have a ghost story to tell you, as well as the bartenders. Many report strange noises, a glass breaking mysteriously, some even seeing lipstick stains on a glass they're drinking from appear out of nowhere. Do ghosts have germs? Is it safe to share a drink with a ghost? I don't know if I would do that unless we got to know each other a bit first, and then hey, anything can happen. I'm open. The bar is said to be haunted by a former tender named Carl, who frequent guests claim they can hear shouting out for last call still years after passing the bar. Some claim they can see Carl's silhouette through his second-floor window. Another ghost said to haunt the premises is the Lady in White, who supposedly pushed attractive women down the stairs. Hardly a way to get them to like you, let me tell you from experience. She's thought to be the ghost of a woman who ran a cat house near the Carafe. Believers say that they see orbs and mist in photos and feel cold spots all over. I guess you could say they serve up more than one kind of spirits. I'll see myself out. I'm sorry, that's not my best work. If you're ever in Houston and looking for a bit of spooky ambiance, definitely check out the Carafe and all of its otherworldly guests. Just make sure to tip your ghost about 15%. Number 3, the Driscoll Hotel. The Driscoll Hotel is another shining spot in the state, said to be a hotbed of paranormal activity. Lone Star State, Lone Scare State, more like. With how many ghosts are said to live in this place, it's hard to imagine that you'd even be able to get a free room. One of the more notable ones is the owner, the cowboy Jesse Driscoll himself, who built the place originally. Shortly after the hotel's construction, it said that Jesse came under very hard times. So, desperate for money, Jesse gambled away the deed to the hotel in a game of cards, and was forever swallowed by this guilt, losing his cherished prize. It's said his spirit still resides in this hotel, in the room looking out at 6th Street and Brazos. A consultant once reported looking out of the window in this room and seeing a man dressed in old western attire, puffing a cigar, asking, "Hey fella, what are you doing in my room?" When he flicked the lights on and off to make sure he wasn't seeing what he thought he'd seen, the varmint disappeared, leaving behind only a trail of smoke. Another notable ghost guests like to talk about is the bride, the ghost of a distraught woman who ended her life in the early 1990s after her wedding was called off, as she blew through all her money in a desperate coping attempt. I get it. Guests say that they see her ghost towing bags up and down the halls of the hotel, still running mad. Now I'll leave you with one last good spooky story out of the Driscoll. There was actually so many for this one. Definitely read up on it at home or visit if you're nearby. It seems like there's a lot going on. There's a painting on the 5th floor. It's a painting of a little girl holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a letter in the other. Paranormal enthusiasts claim that this painting is the daughter of a US senator who passed away in a freak accident at the hotel, and her spirit lingers on in the canvas. Guests claim that they can feel something tugging at their coats or legs when they walk on by. Oof, it's a little too interactive for me for an art experience. Number 2, the Oakwood Cemetery. I gotta say, a cemetery is a pretty classical location for something haunted to be happening. I think we all sort of suspect most cemeteries are haunted as is. I mean, a couple thousand dead bodies all buried underneath the same plot makes my hair stand on end. I said I was gonna try not to do a southern drawl, but I swear it's coming on naturally. I'm sorry. Oakwood Cemetery in particular is well known as a haunted spot to those who believe. It was established sometime in the 1850s, though it's thought that earlier settlers were laid to rest there too. With 23,000 souls resting there, it's no surprise that there is a litany of spooky stories amongst the tombstones. Take a listen to some of the more notable ones I dug up for you. One in particular that gets retold is that of Eula Phillips, a young woman who was struck fatally with an axe on Christmas Eve. Not that there's ever a good day for that, but that's a pretty bad one. Her husband was found guilty, only to be exonerated later when it turned out that there was a series of victims all around the same area matching her profile. 8 others who all fell victim to this is unbelievable that any newspaper ever printed this name, the Servant Girl Annihilator. I cannot believe they named him that. I've actually featured him in a video before. I can't quite remember the title of it, but click through on every single Top 5 Scary video until you find it. There are some theorists who suspect the Servant Girl Annihilator and the infamous Jack the Ripper are one and the same, and that guy just could not get enough traveling from country to country. Some local residents claim that Eula's ghost roams the cemetery, lost, afraid, and panicked, unable to come to terms with the vile means of her death. Another very notable ghost is that of Susanna Dickinson. When Lopez de Santa Anna attacked the Alamo, Susanna and her kin were brought into the garrison. The dust cleared and the battle was over, and Susanna met with Santa Anna, where he offered to take her and her children back to Mexico, but she declined, knowing it might even cost her her life. Surprised, Santa Anna spared her, and her account of the Alamo was crucial to understanding and remembering what happened there. Susanna was buried at a plot in Oakwood, and visitors say she constantly appears to strangers, telling her stories all these years on, still remembering the Alamo. And number 1, Yorktown Memorial Hospital. About 80 miles southeast of San Antonio is Yorktown, a small community with a population that barely exceeds a couple thousand. Probably a good reason for that, because if the legends are to be believed, the hauntings at the Yorktown Memorial Hospital might be keeping people away. The hospital was built in 1951, where it operated for a bit, and was eventually took over by the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church, who kept the place running until late 1986 when it was abandoned. Where it still sits today, almost as if nothing's happened. It looks like everybody just packed up and left. It's said that over 2,000 people call Yorktown their final resting spot, with 500 of those all occurring during the small tenure of the nuns running the hospital. These days, of course, the hospital's sickly lime green walls don't really see a lot of patients. Mostly just ghost hunters and seekers of the paranormal looking for something lurking left behind. And if the stories are true, this place is filled with restless ghosts. Explorers report everything from disembodied voices to sounds of wheelchairs creaking, mysterious flashes of lights, orbs, mists, cold chills, you know, the usual who's who greatest hits of haunted spots. Now, you don't even need to be told this place is haunted to worry about it. I mean, just look at it. The place looks like it's straight out of Silent Hill, down to the rusted pipes and leaky hallways, but don't fret, no, there are ghosts. One in particular is that of a late surgeon, one Leon Norierski. He was infamous around the hospital for his sloppy handiwork, and was said to have lost a number of patients in his time, and his spirit as such has been cursed to wander the facilities endlessly. Keeps writing terrifying messages on the wall, but no one can read them because he's a doctor. That's not my best work. I'm really sorry. Some of these should have stayed on the writing board. Another infamous ghost is that of Sally Sally, a young girl who's said to still live in the hospital's halls, heard happily playing, jovially dancing around, and even asking explorers to read her favorite story when she encounters them. I hope someone takes her up on that. Not me though, nothing personal. I just have like a policy about not reading stories to ghosts. Number 5, the Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel is as infamous as it is gorgeous. This scenic Colorado hotel isn't just famous for a picturesque view of the Rockies, it's also got quite a reputation for serving as the inspiration for fiction's most famous haunted hotel, the Overlook. Now, it didn't serve as the film set for the Stanley Kubrick film, but it was used for the limited TV series and of course inspired Stephen King's legendary horror novel. In 1974, King and his wife stayed at the hotel, visiting at a time when the hotel was preparing to close down for the season. King states that spending time in such a grandiose location, isolated from the rest of the world, away from other guests and signs of life, hearing this discordant, sad music playing in a giant empty dance hall ignited his imagination. He said he was fired up returning to his room 217, and upon pulling back the curtain to his clawfoot tub, imagined, what if somebody died there? And started writing The Shining that night. Now, since it's become known as the Overlook, the hotel has developed a real reputation for hauntings, even being dubbed the Disneyland for ghost hunters at one point. Paranormal enthusiasts come to check out everything staying at the Stanley, and the hotel itself encourages this behavior, offering guided tours. Some highlights include, obviously, room 217, the cursed room from the novel, and it's the most requested room in the hotel. Stories go that in the early 1900s, the head housekeeper was blasted through a floor after a gas leak caused an explosion, and they say that her spirit inhabits the room today, and guests report finding help from the afterlife. Luggage unpacked, lights being turned off, I gotta say, that is some room service. They say that almost every room and cranny of the Stanley is haunted in some way. Is it all just legend inspired by the novel, or is truth stranger than fiction? You'd have to book a trip up to the Stanley to find out. Take their Ghost Hunters package when you do, and tell them Top 5 Scary sent you. And if you're looking for more horror content and you just can't wait, you don't have to go anywhere off this page. Click through on Top 5 Scary because we have loads and loads of ghost videos for you to enjoy. Cryptids, aliens, scary stories, pretty much anything scary you can shake a stick at, we've got. So stay subscribed, stay scared, but stay watching this video because we got way more story left to go. Number 4, the Fairmont Banff. Our next entry is one of Canada's most famous haunted hotels, and you know me, I love a local haunt. That's a little pun for you. The gorgeous property is well known internationally, and not just for its stunning views, but apparently because the place is just top to bottom ghost central. Let's take a look at some of the more notable ones that are haunting the property. The most famous specter at the Fairmont is that of the Ghost Bride. That was a Tim Burton movie, wasn't it? Her story takes us back to the late 1920s, and allegedly it goes that a beautiful young bride was dressed in her gown, ready for the ceremony, when something caught her heel, causing her to slip and fall down the hotel stairs, careening downwards, tragically cutting her life short. Since then, hotel staff and guests alike have reported numerous sightings of a weird veiled figure moving up and down the stairs in a long ethereal white gown, or seeing her in the ballroom by herself, dancing alone, waiting for that first dance she never got. Aww. I dance with you, Ghost Bride. The bride is only one of many ghosts though. The Banff doesn't want to give out the room numbers to avoid any trouble, but allegedly a great number of the rooms in the hotel are cursed. One in question is allegedly the site of a brutal crime, and the story has been told and retold countless times over with details swapped around to make it scarier, but it says that a family was all found dead, and since then, guests have reported horrifying things like hearing screams in the middle of the night or finding handprints on the mirror. If you visit the floor the room is supposed to be on, this room will be closed down to keep guests out, although they say it's just for renovations. Go there, check it out, and then decide for yourself if that's all just a cover story. Number 3, the Crescent Hotel. If you're ever making your way through Arkansas, you simply have to stop off at the Crescent Hotel. It's been called the Grand Old Lady of the Ozarks due to its gorgeous old Gothic design and wonderful mountaintop view. It's kind of a shame almost that such a pretty place has such a morbid, haunted history, but that seems to be a running theme with all these delightful old hotels. The more beautiful they are, the more haunted you are. Its problems began during its construction. A construction worker named Michael plunged to his death from the roof, fatally landing in room 218. Unsurprisingly, since then, that room is said to be haunted, with guests reporting bizarre noises being heard from inside. And this is far from the only cursed tale of this hotel though. Before it found a new life as a hotel, the Crescent was a alternative clinic of sorts, run by a charismatic charlatan by the name of Norman Baker, who claimed that the waters of the nearby springs were so refreshing and so restorative that they could cure any ailment you might have. This might surprise you, but this was not true, as Baker did not have even the most minute amount of medical training. He was just a con man with a winning smile and a bunch of $5 words. Patients would check in expecting to be cured for cancer. That was his main operation. He said it could cure cancer. And his cancer cure was just an injection of corn silk and water, which doesn't do anything. Baker would find himself arrested in 1949, but unfortunately for the victims of his scams, their souls wouldn't find peace just yet. All throughout the hotel, guests report ghostly figures, seeing floating orbs passing through the halls, hearing screams, laughters, and strange bumps in the night. One particularly notable ghost around the Crescent is named Theodora, who was once one of the nurses employed there. Well, nurses. They say she hates mess, and many guests report that they'll discover their belongings have been reorganized for them. I love hearing stories about these helpful ghosts that don't haunt you, they just pack up your stuff for you. Among the cutest stories of spirits, however, is reports of a ghost cat named Morris, who guests claim they can hear purring or feeling a warm sensation on their lap or leg. Oh, the little ghost kitty wants some scritches? I guess he ran out of 9 lives. Guess they're not quite enough. I hope there's some meow mix up in the afterlife. Number 2, the Langham. The Langham Hotel is one of the most famous hotels in England. It's gorgeous and renowned, and it's entertained all manner of famous guests over the many years of its service, and if you believe the rumors, might be entertaining them still if their spirits are still lingering onwards. Built in 1865, is it any wonder now that this hotel is a haunting ground for restless spirits? One of the more reported ghosts to come out of the Langham Hotel is that of a man decked out in Victorian evening wear, seemingly trapped inside room 333. He appears during October, unable to move on from his final resting spot. If you ask the locals, they'll tell you a story of how years and years past, a doctor and his new wife checked into the Langham for their honeymoon. No one seems to agree on what transpired or why this happened, but what's known is that something inside the doctor snapped, and he claimed the life of his new bride, and overcome with grief, took his own life as well, and since then has been unwilling or unable to leave. In 1973, a BBC journalist staying in the room woke up one night in October and claims he saw a fluorescent hovering ball of pure light above him in the room, which then materialized as this man in front of him. The man appeared in Victorian era attire, then pointed ominously at the reporter, who fled the room. Yeah, I would probably do the exact same thing, to be completely frank. It's very refreshing to hear someone act so rationally towards a ghost. Guests sometimes complain of this room feeling overwhelmingly hot or lights flickering on and off during the middle of the night. You know, classic poltergeist behavior. The Victorian doctor is far from the only ghost said to reside in the hotel. Alongside Napoleon III, a butler, and a man in a powdered wig are all repeat offenders. So if you head on up to the Langham, keep an eye out for those beloved guests. And number 1, Myrtle's Plantation. Our final entry is Myrtle's Plantation, said to be one of the most haunted buildings in the entire United States. It's home to many ghost stories and legends stemming from a violent, sordid, unpleasant past. The plantation was first built in 1796, where it traded hands several times between a number of wealthy families. Our first story of haunting comes from 1834, when it was owned by Clark Woodruff, a prestigious judge and, well, also a slave owner. Of his slaves, one was named Chloe, who was a particular target of Woodruff's unimaginable cruelty. She tried to protect herself by eavesdropping and learning what she could do to alter her behavior, but unfortunately, this would just serve as a punishment, as when Woodruff learned she was eavesdropping on him, he had her ears cut off, and then made her wear a green head wrap to not have to look at what he had done. He sounds like a really lovely guy. Legend states that to strike back, Chloe poisoned a cake the Woodruffs were going to eat at a party. And weirdly, there's some differing reports and versions of this story change the intent. Sometimes Chloe was looking to get rid of them. Sometimes she just wanted to make them sick to teach them a lesson. Well, the dosage was lethal, and Mrs. Woodruff and the rest of the family, save for Mr. Woodruff, were all lethally poisoned. As a retaliation, Chloe was hanged on the property. Some believe that she still haunts the ground and that her ghost can be seen, still sporting that green head wrap. The next owners would not fare much better. The next owner was a wealthy family, the Winters. Mr. Winter was a teacher, and one day a stranger riding by came out and fired at Mr. Winter fatally, where he staggered up the stairs to breathe his last. Visitors say that you can still hear his forceful stomps up the stairs as he attempted to get help. The plantation harbors a dark history, but has remained a popular spot for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts to go and stay the night to see what they can find. Number 5. Island of the Dolls. The Island of the Dolls is a peculiar small island just off the coast south of Mexico City. The island is covered, well, absolutely blanketed in hanging dolls, just about everywhere on the small landmass. I probably don't even need to really delve into any of the lore behind this island for you to believe that it's cursed. You can just take a look at it and understand. I mean, it's a secluded, abandoned island inhabited exclusively by dilapidated dolls. What do you need? Don Julian Santana Barrera was a man who had isolated himself from the rest of Mexico City, choosing instead to live alone on this small, meager island. His world would be thrown upside down when he discovered a body laying on the shore one day. Shortly following the discovery, a doll washed up on shore as well, having come in from the channel. This event would change Barrera's life forever. Barrera hung the doll up on the island, believing that this would appease the spirit of the girl and set her free. Well, either it didn't work, or he believed he needed a bit of extra protection, because for the rest of his life, Barrera made it his mission to hang as many dolls as he could across the island, scavenging them from the channel, some from the trash, wherever he could find them, until the island's reputation preceded it, and what was once a small, private residence became the infamous Island of the Dolls. Barrera's story would be cut short in 2001, when his body was discovered in the channel floating, just like the doll all those years ago. But his legacy far from ended there. The island has become a notorious tourist destination, only attainable by a boat out of Mexico City. While most guides are happy to take you, there are some who outright refuse the journey for fear of spirits. It's said that if you are to visit, it's best to bring a doll, to appease whoever could still be living there. Ugh. I kinda ran a tingle down my spine, and that's just number 5. Now if you want more stories like that, we have them coming every single day, hot and fresh. All you've got to do is subscribe and creep on creeping on. Let's keep going. Number 4. The Stanley Hotel. Who doesn't love a nice stay at a good hotel, you know? Someone to tend to your needs, breakfast ready for you wake up, and a TV where you'll flick through the channels for half an hour before settling on Ghostbusters 2, because that's the only thing that's on. Let me introduce you to the Stanley Hotel, one of America's most beautiful resorts. Built in 1909 next to the picturesque Rocky Mountains in Colorado, the Stanley Hotel is a great place to get away from it all. It's isolated away from the rest of the world, and if you're starting to wonder why this hotel seems a bit familiar to you, maybe if I called it the Overlook Hotel, it might come together? Yeah, the Stanley Hotel is the original inspiration for the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Stephen King found the inspiration for his famous haunted hotel after spending a cursed night in room 217, the haunted room from the novel. Amusingly, while the Stanley Hotel served as the actor of sorts for the Overlook in the TV series, it didn't for Stanley Kubrick's legendary adaptation. In that, the hotel standing in for the Overlook asked that room 217 not be used in the film, as it was a real operating room and the hotel was afraid it would lose business, so they changed it to the non-existent room 237 for the legendary Kubrick picture. Now, I could do IMDb trivia about Stanley Kubrick movies all day. What makes the Stanley Hotel so scary? Well, it goes without saying that it's said to be a haunted hotel. All manners of hauntings have been reported. Eerie laughter, unexplained noises, ghostly apparition, things moving on their own, and so forth. Now, the Stanley Hotel embraces its status as a haunted hotel with gleeful open arms. Ghost hunters are invited to stay in their spirited rooms that are purported to have higher levels of supernatural activity. Unsurprisingly, these are the most booked rooms in the entire hotel. Stephen King recounts that the direct events that inspired The Shining was that while he was visiting the hotel, he was terribly afraid of its isolation and its eeriness, describing eating alone in its giant dining hall, hearing quiet orchestral music played over the speakers in a room distant. Apparently, staying there gave him terrible nightmares of his son being chased by some invisible presence. He says as soon as he woke up from the first one, he lit a cigarette and began to write The Shining then and there. Now, my advice for you if you ever take a trip to the Stanley Hotel, make sure you got lots and lots to keep yourself busy with, but make sure you get some time to play. You know what they say about all work and no play, right? Number 3. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Now, some of the wisest men I've ever met have said that it's always sunny in Philadelphia Philadelphia. But if you were one of the doomed souls interred into Eastern State Penitentiary, it was anything but. Eastern State wanted to run things a little differently than the standard American prison system, dubbing their system of punishment the Pennsylvania system, or Whack and Use John's Philly style, depending on who was asking at the time. The Pennsylvania system refers to imposing the prisoners to solitary confinement all the time. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, ate alone, and were only ever accompanied by guards. When being escorted anywhere, the guards would put a black hood over inmates. Unsurprisingly, this was not a terribly popular system. It eventually collapsed inward on itself due to overcrowding, and the program was abandoned in 1913, just 5 years after the prison was constructed. Although this didn't really do much to improve conditions for the inmates there, and really just led the prison to come up with new terrible creative methods of inhumane treatment, such as chaining prisoners' tongues to their wrists, or strapping prisoners to chairs for days on end, dousing prisoners in freezing cold water, and putting the worst prisoners into a pit affectionately dubbed the Hole, where they'd be kept in the dark for weeks at a time. In 1970, after decades of terror, Eastern State closed its gates only to creep them back open as a tourist destination for dark tourists looking to go ghost hunting. A place like this is bound to be home to all sorts of rumors and spirits, right? Well, according to local legends, if you spend a night in Eastern State on one of their Halloween tours, you'll hear all kinds of disembodied laughter, screaming and crying, ghostly figures moving across the walls, and unexplained footsteps. Enjoy the sights. Just make sure the gate doesn't lock behind you. And while we're still on this one, does anybody else think that this could stand to be the best premise for an episode of Always Sunny, like, ever? The gang goes to jail, the gang gets haunted. If anybody knows Danny DeVito's agent, please DM us. Number 2, the Hellfire Club. Don't get too excited. The party won't be meeting Eddie Munson for a D&D session anytime soon at this Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club in Dublin, otherwise known as Montpelier Hill, was once home to a hunting lodge in the 17th century, owned by one Richard Parsons, a man obsessed with black magic and the occult. It's said that the Hellfire Club was a club for Satanists, as the leader was referred to as the King of Hell and would dress like the devil himself during meetings. Every meeting of the Hellfire Club, they left one seat open at the table, just in case Lucifer wanted to drop by. Stories go on to say that members of the Hellfire Club participated in all manner of dark and sinister ritual, sacrificing cats, goats, and if the legends are to be believed, even servants of the Hellfire Club themselves were offered. Legend has it that one fateful day, a strange man appeared in the middle of the night and asked if he could join in at the card game that they were playing for the night. As there was always an open seat, they decided to offer it to him. During the game, a player dropped his cards, and when he went underneath the table to retrieve his hand, they saw that the strange man they had invited had hooves in place of feet, and upon rising from the table, the stranger had vanished into a burst of flame. The building was scorched and set ablaze in 1750, with many differing accounts as to what caused the flame. Some say it was the club itself that set the building on fire to give a more intimidating appearance and keep out outsiders. Some say the devil himself did it, and some say it was a duel that ended badly. Whatever the cause, the Hellfire Club relocated their activities sometime in 1760, and the original building is left empty, where it still stands today. You can visit it today, and it's a fairly popular tourist destination for urban explorers and paranormal investigators who want to see if maybe there's any residual black magic in the soil and walls there. Number 1, Poveglia. This list really has me all kinds of freaked out, reading about all these wretched places. I think we need to focus on a nice island getaway. Why not the island of Poveglia? The forbidden island off the coast of Venice. I knew it was going to be haunted. I wrote this list. Poveglia is an infamous island in Italian history, once serving as a quarantine zone and final resting place for the unfortunate victims of the Black Plague. As the plague ravaged Europe and paranoia set in across the lands, it was said that anyone who showed so much as the slightest symptoms were shipped off to Poveglia to live out the rest of their days. Oftentimes, these people would be sent away without even truly being sick, dooming them to a horrific fate. It's said that over 50% of the island's soil is made of burned human ash. That is terrifying. The ground itself is haunted. In the early 19th century, the island was converted from a quarantine zone to a just as terrifying mental asylum, switching gears a little bit because apparently being host to one setting for a horror movie wasn't quite enough. The asylum did nothing to improve Poveglia's haunted reputation. Instead of being home to the sick now, it was the home to droves of mentally disturbed patients who were made into unsuspecting victims by a doctor's experiments. Doctors at the asylum would impose their patients into lobotomies with no concern for sanitation or the victim's safety. The legend has it that the lead doctor at the asylum, who ran these twisted experiments, was so haunted by the spirits of his former patients that it drove him to such madness he cast himself over the tower of the island where his screams can still be heard. It's been said the island is home to countless tortured abandoned souls, still screaming. Now, if for some reason I told you all of that and you're thinking I really want to visit, first of all, why. And second of all, you're gonna need to be pretty crafty, as the island is completely forbidden. You'll be pressed to the fullest extent of the law if you're caught trespassing into Poveglia. Not even remotely worth the risk, if you ask me. At best, you get arrested. At worst, I got no idea.
Number 5. Hockomock Swamp. Already sounds pretty scary in itself. Something about swamps, you know what I mean? During the 17th century, the Hockomock Swamp was used as a fortress by the Wampanoag people, the predominant band of natives in the area, against invasion by the early British settlers. It played a landscape role in King Philip's War as a strategic base of which to launch assaults with nearby English settlements. During the 18th and 19th centuries, settlers deemed the swamp to be useless, barren land, and it didn't really do much besides sit there and just kind of take up space. They attempted to drain it and convert it into a profitable farmland, however, nothing really grew. The natives of the region placed a much higher value on the swamp, however, for centuries. The first people had relied on hunting food there, riddled with fauna, and the swamp had gained an important legend and folklore among them as being a place where many things meet. They named it Hockomock, the Algonquin term meaning place where spirits dwell, and that's exactly what people say they do. Dwell there. What makes this swamp so haunted is the different purposes it was used for. A cesspool for bones of the fallen. Some places are just more susceptible to violence and death over the years, and that reputation of spirits lingering is what's so heavy and cold about this location. Much of the swamp served a dual purpose as a sacred burial ground as well. The Hockomock is occasionally referred to as the home of the Hobomok. The Wampanoag people worshipped and feared Hobomok, the chief deity of death and disease. Hobomok, composed of human souls of the dead, was known to congregate in areas like the Hockomock Swamp. Thus the term and lore stuck. Yep, just a giant mud monster swallowing souls. Charming. There are many stories and legends that have become associated with this swamp and are even connected to the number 1 on my list. It remains a place of mystery and fear and apparently good frog catching. Number 4. Lowell Cemetery. Lowell Cemetery is a cemetery located in Lowell, Massachusetts. Founded in 1841 and located on the banks of the Concord River, the cemetery is one of the oldest garden cemeteries in the country, making it a perfect place for violence and an eternity of soul searching. Many of Lowell's wealthy industrialists are buried here under lavish Victorian tombstones. Visitors have claimed that this is one of Massachusetts' most haunted cemeteries. What makes a haunted cemetery more haunted than another haunted cemetery, you know? Is there like a competition or like a quota or something? Just gotta keep the numbers up. What is it? I feel like every local claims their cemetery is the oldest and most haunted, and this brings me to our fair maiden here, the mysterious witch, Bonnie. A popular meeting place amongst the local teens at night for some scares and some screams, the statue of a woman with her arms outstretched on a rectangular tomb, her hands clutching a veil that falls down behind her body as though it were a cloak caught in the wind. Her eyes lay cold, staring at the heavens. Under her left eye, a black tear. Paranormal researchers have claimed that the statue holds more of an electromagnetic current, and strange things can be seen in front and around the statue, making it seem like it's moving from time to time. Creepy. There is local lore that if you leave a coin or ribbon on the statue, then you'll get good luck, and in return, if you steal or take the items from the statue, the haunting whispers of bad karma will follow. Although research shows that this gravesite holds no actual sinister history, the ghostly sightings surrounding it are a hotspot within the cemetery. I bet at night under the moonlight, this woman could be very terrifying. Number 3. Boston Common. Most common fact about the Common, one of the most haunted places in Boston. That rhymed really weird, didn't it? If you're out for a walk and feel the need to brush up on your American history, then you can be sure to either see the ladies by the trees or the Patriot men rushing the battlefront. Well, what's left behind from them at least. The Boston Common had a multi-purpose identity through the centuries. Originally as a farm, and then trading grounds for the British and American military, the Common was used as a camp during the American Revolutionary War. 20 minutes to load these old muskets and a lot of people dying. It was also used for public hangings up until 1817, most of which were from the large oaks, which were eventually all replaced with gallows in 1769. These grounds held weight during the witch trials and made a perfect open concept park that a spectacle could be enjoyed at. These people were sick. This place has seen its fair share of violence. The 350-year-old park is full of graves, ghosts, and gallows. It's almost impossible to know just how many bodies lay underneath the park, like a cesspool of unmarked graves from many different eras. Most buried here were low class, sick, or died in battle. Oh, and of course were hanged in front of the public. This place is home to many dark shadows, cold spots, and the occasional smell of gunpowder. Next time you're in Boston, swing by one of America's oldest and fullest cemeteries and see if you can see anything for yourself. Number 2, the Danvers State Hospital. The Danvers State Hospital, or also known as the Danvers State Insane Asylum, was a psychiatric hospital located in Danvers, Massachusetts. It was built in 1874 and opened in 1878 on the isolated site in rural Massachusetts, which, fun fact, the judge who preceded the Salem witch trials lived on. That's bad karma already, isn't it? Despite being included in the National Registry for Historical Places in 1984, the majority of the building was demolished in 2007. At a cost of $1.5 million at the time, the hospital originally consisted of 2 main center buildings with housing for the administration, with 4 radiating wings on each side. The outermost wards were reserved for the most hostile patients. This was a prominent location where medications were being tested by the government, and the favored lobotomy was being fleshed out. When shock therapy failed to control the population, lobotomies started, and in 1939 the population of the hospital swelled to almost over 2,400 patients. A total of 278 people died at the hospital that same year. Neurology experts often call Danvers the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy. Ouch. Visitors to the hospital during these years reported lobotomy patients wandering around staring blankly at nothing, unaware of who they were or what they were doing. Large budget cuts in the 60s played a major role in the progression of closing the Danvers State Hospital, and with nicknames like Hell Hill Hospital and Lunatic Asylum, the hospital began slowly closing its facilities by 1985. The original hospital wards were closed and abandoned soon after. During the 80s, reports began to filter out of the hospital about missing teenage patients. The stories of ghostly figures and shadows in the windows were thriving. Are the ghosts of the lobotomized patients still aimlessly walking the realms of this now demolished hospital? What do you think? And number 1, the Bridgewater Triangle. Just a couple miles south of Boston is one of the most interesting and bizarre places in Massachusetts. I chose this as the number 1 spot due to not only the paranormal ghostly figures that have been seen across the vast plains, but 200 miles of connected weird events that will definitely catch our attention. It's named from the triangle shape. The paranormal events and phenomenon that occurs within these mapped lines includes as many as orbs, UFOs, Bigfoots, fairies, skinwalkers, alien hybrids, you name it, it's there. Well, possibly there. The towns of Raynham, Brockton, Norton, and Taunton are all subject to a universal head scratcher. In the 70s, there of course was a surge of UFO witnesses, at the same time several Bigfoot. Huh, that's interesting. Massachusetts just keeps getting stranger and stranger, doesn't it? Huge humanoid creatures, motherships, and landed UFOs have also been spotted and reported within this 200 square foot mile radius. Do you think this place is like a Skinwalker Ranch type of place? Maybe some motherships are trying to just reconnect with the Wi-Fi upstairs? I don't know. Whatever it is, the Bridgewater Triangle has been home to numerous documentaries and folklore and attracts spooky goers each year with its variety of paranormal activity. Kicking off the list at number 5, the Mission of San Miguel, 1610. The birthplace and historic site, the original San Miguel Church was most likely built shortly after the founding of Santa Fe in 1610 and is claimed to have been the first ever church built in America. Churches are already creaky and creepy, then this is the oldest one in the States? Okay, here we go. This church was built right across the Santa Fe River in the area referred to as the Barrio de Analco, which was inhabited mainly by the native population for the past 1,000 years. The San Miguel mission was first mentioned in writing in 1628, indicating it was in use at that point as both a mission and a school. Although intended as a mission, the Spanish also used it as their parish church until the parroquia was completed. The original San Miguel church was probably much smaller than the structure present, with more of a rectangular apse, a slightly raised sanctuary, and a simple front elevation with no towers at all. The surviving foundations were excavated and closely researched by Bruce Ellis and Stanley Stubbs in 1955. Although the present building dates from 1710, it has undergone a multitude of significant structural changes since its infamous riot in which partially destroyed the building during the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. This was an uprising of mostly the indigenous Pueblo peoples against the Spanish colonizers in Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico. The Pueblo Revolt killed around 400 Spaniards and drove the remaining 2,000 settlers out of the province, which is where the creepy stuff kinda sits around. Since its construction, there have been over 300 years of ghostly apparitions seen at these ruins. You can never really pinpoint a specific person at this location, but there are numerous sightings that have been documented over the years, ranging from ghost horses, dragging sounds, and loud bangs resembling warfare. The San Miguel Chapel still stands after 400 years due to its local, national, and international community that has supported its preservation and history. Everybody chipping in. I love it. Little TLC. I bet you this is also where you see ghosts on different floors that used to be there or behind walls that don't even exist anymore. Like, are they bound by these structures forever? They're just like... Forever? Number 4, La Posada Hotel, 1882. Located at 330 East Palace Avenue in Santa Fe, New Mexico, La Posada Hotel is more than 100 years old, finishing construction in 1884. A lively and prominent spot for celebrities in town during the 1900s, it was originally built to be the home of Mr. Abraham and Mrs. Julia Stabb. Perfect last name for the start of something scary. Stabb. A prominent businessman and a German immigrant, Abraham had constructed this beautiful Grand French Second Empire estate ready to make a life working with his brother Zodak in business and eventually settling down in this historic town, with the mansion acting as a social hub for both the business and celebrity events. It is said that the Stabbs have 7 children, one of which died at birth, and which in fact led Miss Stabb to a depressed self-exile state, dying at the age of only 52. The mansion was converted into a hotel in 1936, shortly after the rubble of the Depression had cleared, and it is said that Julia herself haunts the rooms of La Posada Hotel. Guests have made claims to hear voices in vacant bedrooms, lights flickering on and off, and even doors slamming in the middle of the night. Voices saying things like, "I'm in here." It's never just like casual and calm, like, "Oh yeah, just leave the door open, I'm in here, come on in." It's always a creepy whisper in here, like, "I'm in here." Too creepy. La Posada Hotel Resort and Spa still remains one of New Mexico's most haunted hotels and is active and encourages overnighters to check out the Julia Stabb package, which involves a ghostly tour, history lesson of the grounds, a lovely dinner away from the kids, and a day done right by the pool or spa. Unfortunately, I won't be taking them up on the Stabb package at any time soon. Not at all. No chance. I hear one thing in the middle of the night and I'm out, and I'm up quickly. 12 seconds flat. I'm just like... Number 3, the Old State Penitentiary, 1885. The Old State is located 15 miles south of central Santa Fe and is an active men's maximum security prison that was built in 1885. Acting as a prison system for the US, the prison saw 3 massive riots in its entirety, including 1922, 1953, and the worst and most bloody riot of all, 1980. One of the worst prison riots in American history. It's presumed to be the reason behind its haunting reputation. On February 2nd, 1980, several inmates initiated a riot which led to the inmates gaining control over the prison for a full day and a half. Unfortunately, at the time, post-70s, the prison was overcrowded, underfunded, and riddled with untrained, fresh-faced security guards, with the rampant need for excess bodies due to the overgrowing inmate count. After escaping and organizing this event, the cellmates then tortured 12 prison guards and brutally murdered 33 other inmates. These riots soon became medieval in nature, gruesome, and truly evil. The most famous area for paranormal sightings can be heard and seen around cell block 4. Men here were brutally butchered, dismembered, decapitated, and some even hung up on the cells and burned alive. This section of the prison was closed in 1998 and is now referred to as Old Main. As if that history isn't dark enough, witnesses and researchers claim that there's a ton of spirits that roam this prison. Dark figures and ghostly shadows have been seen roaming the cells and halls, unexplainable slamming of cell doors, men's voices, strange noises, and even echoed screams can be heard at this location. This is why I don't even jaywalk, people. Stay a couple nights at this haunted prison looking at axe marks on the ground? Yeah, no, I'm getting my phone out right away. I know exactly who I'm gonna call. Yeah. Number 2, the Amador Hotel. Located at 251 West Amador Street at the corner of Water Street and Las Cruces, which translates to the Crosses, an area in New Mexico spanning as far back as the settled early 1800s, was thought to be an early mass gravesite for the amount of crosses present in the city. The Amador Hotel has stood serving the community in multiple ways over the years, including a courthouse, a post office, a bank, hotel, and even a county office center. Yeah, can I get 2 stamps, please? Thanks. Built in 1866, the Amador Hotel is a popular Las Cruces ghost tour, and some of the rooms were even used as jail cells. Hey, you're grounded for 15 years to life, I don't know. The courthouse was completed in 1885. Amador added another story to the remaining structure, and Amador Hall became a community center where people conversed in drinking and in storytelling. During tours, guests have reported seeing shadowy figures lurking in the hallways, numerous cold spots, flashlights turning on and off by themselves, and having their arms even touched or scratched. Ah, yeah, that's it. Just a little to the left. That's perfect. Some even say it's the work of a little ghost girl named Annie, who frequently visits the room on the second floor, giggling. Like, giggling is great and all until like a 200-year-old spirit giggles right in your face. Like, what is still funny? This is terrifying. Joke must have been that good. Little ghost girls? Yeah, that's the scariest ghosts imaginable. 100%. The Amador Hotel ghost tour starts at 8 p.m. and during a visit through the tour of the grounds, history and ghost hunting begins. I'm a strict matinee ghost hunter myself, only during the day, or never. Or like around brunch, that's like perfect, nice and sunny. And coming in at number 1, Double Eagle Restaurant. If you're heading down to Mausoleum, New Mexico this weekend and enjoy burgers and ghost stories, well, then the Double Eagle Restaurant is a must stop for you. Known not only for the world's largest green pepper chili burger, this blast from the past decorated head to toe in its luxurious upscale Victorian decor is now the home to 2 prominent and active restaurants, the Double Eagle and Pepper's Cafe. Alright, here we go, let's dive in. Possibly the world's most haunted restaurants, originally owned by the Mace family, owning one of the leading and most lucrative import-export businesses in Santa Fe, was Senor and Senora Mace. Senora Mace expected only the best for her eldest son, Armando. Mothers and their sons, right? Always imaginarily wiping something off their faces. Come here, there's more. There is grim history here, involving 2 forbidden star-crossed lovers and a pair of sewing scissors. Thank you. The Double Eagle Restaurant is not only home for great food, beautifully handcrafted cocktails, but also home to a double homicide gruesome murder, in which these victims' souls would seem to be trapped within these walls forever. Armando, son and heir to his parents' business, falling head over heels in love with the family's household servant named Enos. Although Enos reciprocated such feelings about Armando, their relationship had to remain a secret due to Armando's mother's strict ordinance and the difference in the teenager's social and political positions. When Senora Mace discovered this relationship, she demanded that it end at once and banished Enos from her home indefinitely. It is said that one day Senora Mace came home, unexpectedly interrupting the lovers, mid-swoon, entranced by their love as she grabbed her sewing scissors from the basket on the patio and attacked Enos, stabbing and killing her. As she prepared to strike again, Armando, her son, threw his body in front of Enos and was stabbed instead. Yeah, that's some Romeo and Juliet stuff there, people. The murders were held in the famous Carlotta Salon Room, which can be visited at any time. A heavily requested stop where spooky-goers can see a newspaper article titled Young Lover Ghosts on display, as well as an array of pictures taken of the young ghost lovers together over the years. That's terrifying! Here's the room, here's what happened, here's some proof. That's all I need to know. I've made my mind up. For never was a story of more woe than this of Enos and her Armando, and I tried to end on somewhat of a happy note. Love lasts forever, and that's what I'm taking from this.